Enid Blyton's The Five Findouters and the Dog. Adventure 1. The Mystery of the Burnt Cottage. Chapter 5. Fatty and Larry Learn a Few Things. At 10 o'clock the next morning, the 5 children and Buster were once again in the old summer house. Fatty looked important. He produced an enormous sheet of paper on which he had drawn the right and left footprint, life-size, with all its crisscross markings on the rubber sole. It was really very good. The others stared at it. "Not bad, is it?" said Fatty, swelling up with importance, and as usual making a bad impression on the others by boasting. "Did I tell you I was good at drawing?" Larry nudged Pip and whispered in his ear. "Pull his leg a bit," he said. Pip grinned and wondered what Larry was going to do. Larry took the drawing and looked at it solemnly. "Quite good, except that I think you've got the tail a bit wrong," he said. Pip joined in at once. "Well, I think the ears are the wrong shape too," he said. "At least the one on the right is." Fatty gasped and looked at his drawing to make sure it was the right one. Yes, it was a copy of the footprints, all right. Then what were Larry and Pip talking about? "Of course, they say that hands are the most difficult things to draw," said Larry, looking at the drawing carefully again, his head on one side. "Now I think Fatty ought to learn a bit more about hands." Daisy tried to hide a giggle. Bets was most amazed, and looked at the drawing, trying to discover the tail, ears, and hands that Larry and Pip were so unaccountably chatting about. Fatty went purple with rage. "I suppose you think you're being funny again," he said, snatching the drawing out of Larry's hand. "You know quite well this is a copy of the footprints." "Golly, so that's what it is," said Pip in an amazed voice. "Of course, Larry, how could we have thought that they were anything else?" Daisy went off into a squeal of laughter. Fatty folded up the paper and looked thoroughly offended. Buster jumped up onto his knees and licked his master's nose. Bets put everything right in her simple manner. "Well," she said, astonished, "it was all a joke, wasn't it, Larry? I looked at the drawing and I could quite well see it was a really marvelous copy of those footprints we saw. I couldn't imagine what you and Pip were talking about. Fatty, I wish I could draw as well as you can." Fatty had got up to go, but now he sat down again. The others grinned. It was a shame to tease poor old Fatty, but really he did have such a very good opinion of himself. "I've just shortly written down a few notes about yesterday," said Larry, drawing a small notebook out of his pocket. He opened it and read quickly the list of clues they already had. He held out his hand for Fatty's drawing. "I think it had better go with the notes," he said. "I'll keep both the notes and the drawings and the scrap of grey cloth somewhere carefully together, because they may soon become important." "Where shall we keep them?" "There's a loose board just behind you in the wall of the summer house," said Pip eagerly. "I used to hide things there when I was little like Bets. It would be a fine place to put something now. No one would ever think of looking there." He showed the others the loose board. Buster was most interested in it. He stood up on the bench and scraped hard at it. "He thinks there's a rabbit behind it," said Bets. The notebook, the matchbox with the grey rag, and Fatty's drawing were carefully put behind the loose board, which was then dragged into place again. All the children felt pleased to have a hidey hole like that. "Now what are our plans for today?" said Pip. "We must get on with the solving of the mystery, you know. We don't want the police to find out everything before we do." "Well, one or more of us must interview Mrs. Mintz the cook," said Larry. He saw that Bets did not understand what interviewing was. "That means we must go and see what the cook has to say about the matter," he explained. Bets nodded. "I could do that," she said. "You!" said Pip scornfully. "You'd tell her right out all that we had done and found and everything. You can't even keep the very smallest secret." "I don't tell secrets now," said Bets. "You know I don't. I haven't told a single secret since I was 6 years old." "Shut up, you two," said Larry. I think Daisy and Pip might go and see Mrs. Mintz. Daisy is good at that sort of thing, and Pip can keep a lookout to see that Clearorf or Mr. Hick don't come along and guess what Daisy is doing. What shall I do, Larry? Asked Fatty, quite humbly for once in a way. You and I could go and talk to the chauffeur, said Larry. He might let out something that would be useful for us. He usually washes down the car in the morning. What about me? Said Bets in dismay. Aren't I to do anything? I'm a find outer too. There's nothing you can do, said Larry. Bets looked very miserable. Fatty was sorry for her. We shan't want Buster with us, he said. Do you think you could take him for a walk over the fields? He just loves a good rabbity walk. Oh, yes, I could do that, said Bets, brightening up at once. I should like that. And you never know, I might find a glue on the way. Everyone laughed. Bets simply could not remember the way to pronounce that word. Yes, you go and find a really important glue, said Larry. So Beth set off with Buster at her heels. She went down the lane towards the fields, and the others heard her telling Buster that he could look for rabbits and she would look for glues. Now then, to work, said Larry, getting up. Daisy, you and Pip go down to Mrs. Mintz. What excuse shall we give for going to see her? Asked Daisy. Oh, you must think of something yourself, said Larry. Use your brains. That's what detectives do. Pip will think of something if you can't. Better not all go down the lane together, said Pip. You and Fatty go first and see if you can find the chauffeur at work, and Daisy and I will come a bit later. Larry and Fatty went off. They walked down the lane and came to Mr. Hicks's house, which stood a good way back in its own drive. The garage was at the side of the house. A loud whistling came from that direction, and the sound of water. He's washing the car, said Larry in a low voice. Come on, we'll pretend we want to see someone who doesn't live here, and then ask if he'd like to help us to help him. The boys went down the drive together. They soon came in sight of the garage, and Larry went up to the young man who was hosing the car. Morning, he said. Does Mrs. Thompson live here? No, said the young man. This is Mr. Hicks's house. Oh, said Larry in a vexed tone. Then he stared at the car. That's a fine car, isn't it? He said. Yes, it's a Rolls Royce, said the chauffeur. Fine to drive. She's very dirty today, though. I've got all my work cut out to get her clean before the master wants her this morning. We'll help you, said Larry eagerly. I'll hose her for you. I often do it for my father. In less than a minute, the two boys were at work helping the young chauffeur, and the talk turned on to the fire. Funny business, that fire, said the chauffeur, rubbing the bonnet of the car with a polishing cloth. The master was properly upset about losing those valuable papers of his. And now they say it was a put-up job. Someone did it on purpose. Well, Peaks did say that it was a wonder no one had given Mr. Hick a slap in the face for the way he treats everybody. Who's Peaks? Said Larry, pricking up his ears. Peaks was his manservant, sort of valet and secretary mixed, said the chauffeur. He's gone now, went off the day of the fire. Why did he go? Asked Fatty innocently. Got kicked out, said the chauffeur. Mr. Hick gave him his money and he went. My word, there was a fine old quarrel between them. Whatever about? Said Larry. Well, it seems that Mr. Hick found out that Peaks sometimes wore his clothes, said the chauffeur. You see, he and the master were much of a size, and Peaks used to fancy himself a bit. I've seen him prance out in Mr. Hick's dark blue suit, and his blue tie with the red spots, and his gold-topped stick too. Oh, said Fatty. And I suppose when Mr. Hick found that out, he was angry and told Peaks to go? Was Peaks very upset? You bet he was, said the chauffeur. He came out to me, and the things he said about the master would make anybody's ears burn. Then off he went about 11 o'clock. His old mother lives in the next village, and I guess she was surprised to see Horace Peaks marching in Baggage and all? At that time of the morning? The two boys were each thinking the same thing. It looks as if Pigs burned the cottage. We must find Pigs and see what he was doing that evening. There came a roar from a window overhead. Thomas, is that cart done yet? What are you jabbering about down there? Do I pay you for jabbering? No, I do not. That's the master, said Thomas in a low tone. You'd better clear out. Thanks for your help. The boys looked up at the window. Mr. Higgs stood there, a cup of tea or cocoa in his hand, looking down furiously. Mr. Hiccup, said Larry with a giggle. Dear old good-tempered Hiccup. Fatty exploded into a laugh. We'll call him Hiccup, he said. I say, we've got some news this morning, haven't we? I bet it was Peaks, Larry. I bet it was. I wonder how Daisy and Pip are getting on, said Larry as they went down the drive. I believe I can hear them chattering away somewhere. I guess they won't have such exciting news as we have. If you like this storytelling, please do like, share, comment and subscribe to Recital Entertainment. Thank you.